Well, hello there, and welcome back to our second part of the conversation on what our best trilogies in movies are. And so far, this has been a pretty spicy list. It's been a very nice conversation. We just finished up the first part with my eighth spot. And just to give you a reminder, I put the Iron Man trilogy at the number eight spot, just to give you guys a quick refresher. So far, at number 10, I have Jurassic World. Number nine, I have Jurassic Park. And at number eight, I have Iron Man. So without further ado, I will let my brother, just refresh you guys on his list, and he'll lead us off into this conversation with his number eight spot.
All right, so coming in at my 10th number spot is the Star Wars sequel trilogy. My number 9 spot is Jurassic World. And my 8th spot is Iron Man as well.
Okay, see, this is probably the only project that we're gonna agree on.
Yes. So my brother already told you the statistics of this trilogy in terms of how much money it costed, how much money it made. As we know, Iron Man started off the MCU. He basically gave birth to the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it with the first Iron Man movie in 2008. Again, one of the best solo films of the MCU, one of the best superhero solo films of all time, for sure. Robert Downey Jr., born to play the role, fantastic as Iron Man, but again, one of the reasons this trilogy is so low is because of consistency and the growth that his character has outside of this trilogy. Now, he does have a lot of growth in the MCU, but I say the MCU for a reason because I feel more of that is in the Avengers and other movies as well. Um, Iron Man starts off very, very strong. But the second one, we definitely get a downfall again. That's where we see that crumble, and it seems to be the curse in these bottom trilogies. Third one, I actually really do enjoy. A lot of people do not like it. I definitely do enjoy the third one, and I think it closes out pretty strong. But unfortunately, Iron Man is not one of my favorite characters, so maybe that's why it is a little lower. But also just in the sense of how it wraps up as a trilogy, I think there's too much wiggling going on there, and again, we haven't had a consistent three movies in any of these trilogies that we both have listed so far. So that is why it is at the number 8 spot. Now I do love Iron Man in the MCU, and I think he is a critical character for the MCU. But I just think that we get too much down down in the middle. And even though we do get a lot of redeeming things in the third one, it is not a it's not a super strong closeout for this trilogy. So that is why I am going to put it at number 8.
Yeah, pretty solid. I mean, like I said, that's probably the only one that we are going to agree on.
Mm,
So yeah, nice. Okay. Um, so starting off at my seventh spot, I have the Star Wars sequels trilogy.
interesting.
Um,
Very
for
interesting.
those of you that don't know, when it comes to my takes, I'm just gonna let you guys know the statistics, just that because that's how I just wrote it in my notes. Um, so when we're talking about the sequels, first of all, their budget was fairly high. They had it estimated at anywhere from 781 million to 1.2 billion. I mean that's just to make a movie. I mean, well, that's just to make the three trilogy movies. I mean,
Yeah.
that's and the three movies themselves actually were able to get at the box office $4.5 billion. So it is, I mean, just looking at it, it's one of the highest grossing film trilogies on this list, actually, looking at the numbers. Um, the Star Wars sequels, obviously, there's a lot of controversy, there's a lot of conflict around them. Um, Looking at the ratings, surprisingly, actually, the critic ratings were very fascinating when it came to this trilogy. We have Star Wars: The Force Awakens at a 93%. Again, very strong start. It was definitely one of the best movie of the sequel trilogy. A lot of people could argue that it's just a copy and paste of A New Hope with new characters. However, J.J. Abrams knocks it out of the park, and he really gives us that sense of magic and nostalgia that, as you mentioned before, same with Jurassic World, that The Force Awakens gave. I mean, again, we haven't seen a Star Wars project in about 10 years. So to see, to hear the classic music, to see the classic settings and everything, I mean, it was like being a kid again. And it was a great start to the sequel franchise. Surprisingly, even episode 8, The Last Jedi, still the critics gave it a 91%, even though it's not only the worst Star Wars movie in production, but it's also a bad movie. And me and my manager discussed this for like 5 hours, my shift on like Saturday. Not only is it a bad Star Wars movie, it is just a bad movie. A lot of the characters don't make sense. A lot of their development is thrown out the window. And when you have Mark Hamill, aka Luke Skywalker, literally looking at the script and is like, "This is not Luke Skywalker. Who is this?" You know that Ryan Johnson effed up. I mean, the direction that they went in made no sense. Um, Again, Ryan Johnson is a phenomenal director. Knives Out is a great movie. I have not seen the sequel to Knives Out, but I hear that is pretty decent as well. Um, so again, he is a phenomenal director. However, sometimes when it comes to directors and when it comes to writers, because not only did he direct this project, but he also wrote it too. So you can't even blame him for just directing it. He directed it and he wrote it. So he kind of shot himself in the foot, and then he decided to shoot himself again. Uh, it didn't click with him, and unfortunately, and thankfully, we will never see Ryan Johnson in Star Wars again. Um, but again, still, even though the audience score was so terrible, the critics love this movie, and I do have to agree, the movie cinematically was stunning. All the planet designs, these space battles, everything was visually stunning. Not Scarif, I'm sorry. Um, oh God, what is that planet? Do you remember that planet towards
The
the very
Salt
end?
Planet.
Yes. Do you know the name of the planet?
I was about to say Christopsis, but that's definitely not right.
Crate.
Oh, I
Yeah,
was.
great. Yeah, I figured that. You kind of helped me when you were saying. I was like, okay, yeah. Planets like Crate, and especially the throne room scene is like one of the nicest looking scenes like of that movie. So the movie does very well for itself, cinematographic wise. It's not even a word, but you know what I mean. It just looks really pretty. Okay. However, the amount of beauty in this movie could not save it. And then again, we see that trend where it starts off great, right? Okay, we're in like 91, so we're still there, and then again, Rise of Skywalker, episode 9, 52%. So
Oh,
straight down,
that's rough.
straight down, like little, just straight drop. Um, and for this movie to end out the Skywalker saga, it was terrible. It is definitely better than The Last Jedi, but it is still just as awful. And even though J.J. Abrams did such a good job with The Force Awakens, not even George Lucas himself could come back and save the franchise with this movie.
Sure.
It was a very cool concept. If they would have flushed it out properly like they were supposed to, I think would have been for some very interesting storytelling. But just like The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker butchered characters. And again, we can go on and on about this, but the ending makes no sense. There are so many different little things that they could have done that would have just made this movie a little bit more better. Um, and overall, it was just a bad end to the Skywalker saga. I mean, I'm actually glad that they are exploring different eras of Star Wars now because I do not want to return to this era. Um, there is hope that someone like Rey, who again was a very prominent and important character throughout the sequels, and her character could have been so much more. But again, I feel like the writing just butchered her character, and instead of just leaving her a nobody and maybe expanding upon that theory, they were just like, no, we'll just make her a Palpatine. That sounds good, and they just kind of threw her to the wolves. So hopefully, because this movie is set 15 years after and it has nothing to do with the sequels, will we see characters from the sequels? Maybe, maybe not. Nobody's been confirmed besides Daisy Ridley. I am a little skeptical about the director though, because all she has directed has been documentaries, and Star Wars is not a documentary film. So I don't know how I feel about this. Um, but if it's done right, I think it could bring a lot of justice to the character. I don't think it could bring any justice to the sequels, but I think if they could at least save maybe one character, I mean that's a plus. So
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, that is why, unfortunately, again, even though I love Star Wars, if you couldn't tell, Star Wars and Star Wars. And then but unfortunately, that's why I have it seventh on my list. Again, I just think there are more projects that are a lot better than it. So
All right. Very interesting. So coming in at my number 7 spot, I have the Captain America trilogy.
wow, compared to what that is on my list, that's that's quite a difference.
um, so I absolutely love Captain America, and I really do like this trilogy. Now, I will agree that this is the first trilogy in this list that all three movies are good. Some are better than others, obviously, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But obviously, Captain America, probably another prominent character in the MCU. One of the most prominent characters in the Avengers lineup. Um, Classic story we see in the first Captain America, the First Avenger, one of the older MCU films. Chris Evans, again, you could argue, is born to play the role. He does fantastic in this film. I love the film. I think it's great. It's super rewatchable. Um, Again, I'm not sure about statistics of it, but I'm sure it definitely made money. Um, Captain America: Winter Soldier, one of the best MCU films out there, one of the best superhero films out there. Not much of a Captain America story, in my opinion. I do not think that the trilogy falters at all, especially in the second one. I think it actually goes up a lot in the second one. And it does show a side of Captain America that I do enjoy, and it gives you a different feel to the MCU. But I just feel like Captain America's story gets lost in this one. And that is why I kind of put it a little more down towards my list. It was hard to figure out what exactly middle I wanted to have. Um, and then the last one, Captain America Civil War. The main reason it is also at this spot is because of this movie. I love this movie, but it is not a Captain America movie. I feel like they were lazy in the sense of putting Captain America in the name and just basically to give him a trilogy. I do like both sides of each teams in this. But again, I feel like a lot of it is Captain America just wanting to save his friend and defending him any means necessary. So I feel like his character gets lost a little bit in this film. But overall, it is a very strong trilogy, and we are going to see that with probably the next couple of trilogies on this list. But my main reason is because it doesn't feel connected. Feel it is a very strong trilogy, but I feel like first one, Captain America. Second one, spy espionage. Third one, team up. I feel like we get disconnected from Captain America a little bit, especially when we go further and further into his trilogy. I do think he is a consistent character throughout his trilogy, though. So that's why it's kind of in this area. But yes, for those reasons, Captain America's trilogy is my seventh on this list.
That's fair. I can see your reasons behind that. Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, like I said, this is just spicy, spicy, spicy.
Yes, sir.
Um, you're gonna flip out when I read when I read you my next one. Um, so at my number six spot, I have Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh no! Oh,
That's right. I have Guardians of the Galaxy at my number six spot.
it hurts.
And again, I looked at this list from a purely neutral and statistical standpoint, and it hurts. It really does. If this was a personal list, this would easily be like top four, top three. Um, for those of you that don't know, the budget for the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy was about $682 million, and the box office is currently at 2.4 billion for the Guardians of the Galaxy. However, Volume 3 is still out in theaters, so that box office report is going to keep growing. So it's not officially accurate, but that is currently what I found so far. So it's done very well for itself. Again, looking at the critical scores, again, we have Guardians of the Galaxy starting off real good at a 92%. It's probably, again, one of the, best solo films of the MCU, before they made more movies about it. Um, we see it drop off a little bit. We see Guardians of the Galaxy 2 at 85%, and then we see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 at 82%. So even though critically it went down a few points, still pretty solid. So far on my list, I mean, it's one of the fairly solid trilogies. But again, we're seeing that trend of it slowly going down. However, this one is not drastic at all. Those are still great scores. Just like in school, anything like a B or better is great. And I mean, this is exactly what these scores are. Um, However, it's just, I don't know. It's really hard to explain why this is so low. Um, Again, I think just because of the fact that again you have, Guardians of the Galaxy come out of the gate with such a strong score, and then the second movie it goes down a few points. Okay, no big deal. Third and final movie, it goes down a few points again. So unfortunately, although James Gunn is brilliant, Guardians was not able to keep a positive trend moving forward. Similar to Captain America, but at least with Captain America, his movies were always very consistent. So there was always a positive trend. There was never a drop off. So I mean, it went from like 80 to 90 and then 90 again. So I mean, it was a constant flow of upward moval. Um, However, even though it didn't drop off too much, it still did drop off. So, there were some things that were lacking. Um, I think the biggest problem for the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy is the second movie. Although I really enjoy the movie, it's probably one of the funniest movies. I mean, we discussed that in our previous episode. It is one of the funniest movies. I mean, there are some classic one-liners in there. I mean, classic when they're doing the superhero poses. Mantis gets hit by a rock, and the Drax is like, "Mantis, look out!" Best line of the whole entire movie. It's great. It wasn't everybody's favorite, and I think that hurt the Guardians a little bit. However, they made up more than well for it in Volume 3. I mean, I am very shocked by what the critics rated at. I mean, I think it is better critically rated than Volume 2, but again, I'm not a critic. Um, but again, they more than made up for it when it came to Volume 3. And again, it is such a beloved franchise, but because it had that inconsistency, and it had that little bit of a blip on its record, um, that's why I put it so low, because I'm looking for that consistency. I'm looking for that money making. I'm looking for what was done right. Because again, when it comes to movies, when it comes to trilogies, people are always afraid to make more movies of a franchise because they want it to always be as good as their first movie. There are cases where the second or third movie are better than the first movie. However, usually the trend is when it comes to trilogies or when it comes to duologies, I believe that the just two movie term is called. There is always a chance for your second or third movie to be a failure and to have it be lower rated than your first one. Um, so, again, Guardians is a great franchise. I think if we're looking at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it is the best trilogy out of everything. It is definitely up there when it comes to, Avengers or even Spider-Man. It is definitely top three Marvel Cinematic Universe trilogy. However, when it comes to this specific list, unfortunately, I have to put it somewhat mid-tier, even though I know from the bottom of my heart it is not mid-tier. For this list, I have to put it mid-tier. So that's why it's at my number 6 spot. I
That
know.
hurts.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
It's
I didn't
fine.
mean to do it to you. I'm sorry.
That's a shock. Like that is probably the movie on this list so far that has come as a shock to me. The other ones, yes. I mean, Jurassic Park a little shock to me too, but this one was a shock. I don't think mine is as shocking, but coming in at my number 6 spot, I have Star Wars: The Prequel Trilogy. Um,
Okay.
Once again, love Star Wars to death. Um, but as we know, this trilogy really only has one strong movie. Starts off with obviously Phantom Menace. Now, I do enjoy Phantom Menace's story. He gave us a lot of memes, but it also does have a lot of heart in it at times. Even though young Anakin can be cringy, I do think it does justice to his story of him becoming, what he would end up becoming, obviously, Also has one of the best teaser posters of all time in all of cinema. Um, it gives us classic shots. It gives us classic lines. It gives us a lot of things, such as the Duel of Fates. Um, Again, we see Darth Maul on the big screen. We see Qui Gon Jinn. We see a young Obi Wan. So that is also fun. But overall, it is a weaker Star Wars film. Um, I just I just don't think there's enough there to really start off this trilogy strong. Then we get to the second one, Attack of the Clones. I do think this is overhated. And I feel like as you get older, you will come to love this movie a little more than you might have did when you were a kid, because it is a little more on the romantic side between Anakin and Padme. Now looking back, and actually, even if you hear those cringy lines or everything or anything, they're in love. They're falling in love. They're they want their life together. It's gonna be cringy. Um, but it's also to what this story is developing to in the third film. It makes sense and it brings a lot of heart. And even though it can be slower at times, I feel like it really does Anakin's character development justice. And even though he can be a whiny bitch at times in this film, and basically hump Padme's leg any chance he gets, I still think it is important to his character. I think it's important to his character growth. I also do, of course, like the introduction of clones. It also gives us, the. I mean, it's not really like a meme now, but it's the classic meme of like, oh, you ever just be in a rainstorm and like, it's just like people being Obi-Wan and just being like, Master, I've had, like,
I've
what's
made
it called?
contact with the Kaminoans, Uncle
Yeah,
Vito.
yeah. So it gives us that stuff. It gives us the whole Geonosian like arena battle. That's cool. It also gives us Dooku. Um, gives us a lot of stuff. So it's not. It's. I don't think it's a fall from the first movie. I think it actually kind of goes up a little bit, in my opinion. And then when we get to the third one, this is one of my favorite Star Wars films. And I do think this is one of the stronger Star Wars films in all the trilogies. What's it called? Revenge of the Sith. I think Anakin's portrayal in this is beautiful from the moment it starts in the film to the moment it ends. Um, I honestly love every single character in this film, and it has no doubt the best live action Star Wars battle we've ever seen, and possibly will ever see. Um, Absolutely heartbreaking between Anakin and Obi Wan. One of the best duos in Star Wars, and it's truly a beautiful send off in this one. I do like Anakin and Padme's relationship in this one as well. Um, and of course, Order 66 is another crucial part. Overall, this trilogy is a little tricky, and it was very hard to rank only because of how strong certain films were. I think this is the first trilogy where the last film is the strongest as of right now. The first one, I think is honestly the weakest. The second one I do think gets a little I think it gets better as it goes on. I think this is one where we didn't necessarily see the second one crumble, and people probably will debate that to this day because the prequel trilogy is debated often. But I think this is one where we started kind of with our feet still on the ground. I think we lifted it a little bit in the second one. I think we finally jumped up in the third one and made that dunk or I don't know some sports reference. Um, but what's it called? Again, putting aside statistics or anything because I didn't do that. I know my brother will tell you whenever we get to it. I'm sure it made its money back. Maybe not a crazy amount, but it probably did. Um, but also, this is another trilogy that I feel like as it went on, like when throughout the years, it has grown. So I feel like that's why it kind of deserves the middle spot. Even though you can argue that Captain America's trilogy is stronger overall than this prequel trilogy, for sure. But I think in terms of how I rank it and how I talk about it, this is kind of why I put it this way because we know the one story that's being told here. We know what universe we're in, and we know where it's going. So I think for that consistency, I put it just above Captain America, even if the movies aren't as highly ranked as Captain America's. But that is why Star Wars prequel is in my 10, 9, 8, 7, 6th. That is that my sixth spot? Yeah,
Yeah,
that
for
is
the
why Star Wars prequels in my sixth spot. I couldn't remember if I was at number 6 or 5.
honestly, as you were talking, you actually made me change my fourth and fifth spot. They're just like reversing with one another. Because you gave me a lot to think about. So no, I mean I can see why you put the prequels there. I mean, I think it's pretty solid. It's nice to see it at least mid tier. Uh,
Yeah.
so for my fifth place spot, with a quick last minute adjustment, because anything can happen here on Tucson's podcast. Uh, I am putting the Dark Knight trilogy at my number 5 spot. For those of you that do not know, I shall enlighten you. The Dark Knight trilogy, budget wise, took about 525 mil. I'm sorry, $535 million. I couldn't read my own handwriting. $535 million budget wise. Box office wise, it was $2.3 billion. So again, did fairly well in the box office. Obviously made most of its money back, if not all of it, and some. Um, critically wise, for those of you that do not know, the Dark Knight trilogy, it starts with the Batman Begins, and then it starts with the Dark Knight is the middle movie, and then the Dark Knight Rises is the third and final movie. So Batman Begins had an 84% critic score on Rotten Tomato. The Dark Knight had a 94% on Rotten Tomato, and then the Dark Knight Rises had an 87%. So again, similar to Guardians of the Galaxy, we see a fairly consistent range of scores. Again, they do, um, you know, the Dark Knight is actually the first trilogy on this list. I think it's the first trilogy on this list. Yeah, the first trilogy that I have on my list. That the movie Batman Begins starts out in '84. Then the Dark Knight Rises, boom, takes it right to the top. And the Dark Knight takes it right to the top, and then the Dark Knight Rises takes it down a little bit, but it's more of like an even curve. So, again, even though the scores do not stay consistent, and we see a eventual drop in scores in the third and final movie, it does stay pretty consistent where it doesn't really damper it too much. Very similar to Guardians. Um, Very unforgettable trilogy. I mean, The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises are two of my favorite Batman films of all time. I personally think that Christian Bale is like the best rendition of Batman that we've seen so far. In the DC universe, I mean, this is obviously before Flashpoint and before they reset the timeline, so we don't know, um, what things are going to turn out to be. However, Robert Pattinson is doing a very good job as Batman. The Batman was widely successful, and I'm really looking forward to the Batman 2. Where they introduce, it's been rumored that they're going to introduce Clayface as the main villain, so that will be pretty cool to see. I think he's doing a phenomenal job, so I think he's like definitely that top 2 spot when it comes to Batman in the DC universe. But I mean, we grew up with the Dark Knight Rises trilogy, classic memes and just classic, one liners come out of there, like, just where is she? Where's the trigger? Where's
Hit me,
the
Batman. Hit me.
yeah?
I can't do it.
Heath Ledger is excellent in these films. I mean, rest in peace. I mean, he's one of the best Joker, reenactments, I guess, or renditions. I was trying to say like renditions.
Yeah.
He's possibly the best Joker of all time.
One of the best villains, like
Yeah,
portrayals of all time in film, in my opinion.
right. I mean, and then just like that, I mean, you got Bane also in The Dark Knight Rises. He's a great villain. He's portrayed, very well. And again, I don't really remember too much about Batman Begins. Um, but from what I can remember, it was a pretty good film. It was definitely a good start to the trilogy. And then again, like I said, from there it got better and better. Even though we did see the drop off in scores with The Dark Knight Rises, but there it is beautiful cinematic wise. I mean, one of my favorite scenes of all time is from the Dark Knight Rises, where it's all the policemen lined up in the street, waiting to face off against like Bane and his thugs. Beautifully done. Even stuff such as simple as like having the men walk out on the ice, is also really well shot. Um, Everything is really done. I mean, even Two Face, his portrayal, and how he kind of descends from Harvey Dent to Two Face. Is his name Two Face, right? Am I getting that right? Is it Two Face?
Um, Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But seeing his like, arc, from again, like, public citizen to like, kind of like crazed maniac, is is pretty good. Jim Gordon is great. He's one of my favorite Jim Gordon done. Um, the only thing that I didn't like is how they kind of teased I'm forgetting his name in the movie, but how they teased Robin, towards the end of The Dark Knight
Yeah.
Rises. Um, Alfred is great. I don't remember the actor's name, but I love him as Alfred. I think he's like the best. Um,
Michael Caine, I think it was. I can't
yes.
remember.
Um, but overall, it's a great trilogy. It's definitely one of the stronger points of the DC universe because obviously they're not so consistent. Um, but this is definitely why it's in my fifth spot when it comes to my list. So I think we're gonna have time for your fifth place spot, and then we'll have to come back for our third and final part with our top four.
Okay, so in my fifth spot, I have the Dark Knight trilogy as well. So this was one that was kind of tossed up between um, the Star Wars prequel trilogy and Captain America. Actually, I was kind of debating on where I wanted to put these three. It was very hard to decide that mid-tier table in this. Um, excuse me. Once again, I feel like this is another trilogy where all of the movies are strong. But ironically, the second one is the strongest one in this trilogy, in my opinion. Um, Batman Begins does start off pretty strong, I will say. We do actually have Liam Neeson in here as Ra's al Ghul. I think Christian Bale's first portrayal as Batman was pretty well received, and we really didn't see much of the actual Batman stuff in this film. That's kind of why I feel like it's not as popular, and I don't think it's as strong compared to The Dark Knight. Um, the Dark Knight is one of the best just comic book movies in my opinion, just because of how well Heath Ledger portrays the Joker and how good Christian Bale and him are with interacting with each other in this film. Um, I I really think that this film does a lot of comic book nerds, dreams or whatever they want justice. And I really feel like why it is such a good film is because of Heath Ledger and his portrayal. It has some of the most iconic shots in film, arguably, and in especially comic book film. Um, any interaction we see between the Joker and Batman in this one is it feels kind of heavy in a sense, especially at certain moments. Um, Especially when we see towards the end with choosing to save Rachel, and as well as some of the best things I like about this film is other people having to decide other people's fates, such as the I believe it's two people, two boats. One is filled with prisoners, and one is filled with I think normal citizens.
Mm.
And basically, I think they each get the bomb or whatever to detonate the other boat. And obviously everybody think the prisoner is gonna do it, blah blah blah. And that falls in their hands. So it not only brings Batman and Joker and Two Face, as well as all the other known characters in this film, but it also gives normal people their own roles and how this film does play out. Um, we also no, that's the next one. Sorry. Um, Again, I feel like the ending is pretty strong as well. And I feel like we see a lot of cool gadgets and everything in this one. I feel like Christian Bale's Batman isn't known for his, strength, but I feel like he is definitely known for his voice and definitely his gadgets and how he um, kind of how he deciphers and thinks about and plans, what he may or may not do. But we could. Sorry, I muted myself. Um, we can decipher this movie all day long. Dark Knight Rises. I think it's a decent closeout to the trilogy. I don't think it's the strongest closeout. People have their opinions on Tom Hardy's Bane, but excuse me, I do enjoy his Bane. I think him and Christian Bale are also great together as well. I do like the story of basically Christian Bale losing, like him, not Christian Bale, but obviously Batman losing himself in this one and having to come out of, I don't remember what it was called, but you know that giant hole,
Yeah.
like prison slash thing. Him coming out of that, uh, and you know basically at the end doing what Batman does. We also have Catwoman in this film, who is she's okay. I think it's Anne Hathaway that plays
It
her.
is. It is in Hathaway.
Again, kind of just a side character to throw in there, I think, for you know other purposes. And we also, what's it called? We do get, like you said, Robin, but you know, not actually Robin.
Mhm.
Just you know, some teaser. And I do like how I feel like what Christopher Nolan does in these films, and we see it in this one as well, is we see the people play a pivotal part. You know, mainly with the cops and the thugs. You know, that is an iconic shot in any Batman film and probably comic book film as well. So I do like that. Also, you have the people in there doing that. But one of the reasons it is ranked, you know, basically mid tier is because I feel like it is consistent in the sense of each movie is pretty strong on its own, but the second one is the strongest, and then we kind of see a fall down in the next one. But we could argue, you know, the weight that the second one held, and it was hard to kind of close that out. But you know, that's why I'm putting it at my number five spot.
And what's also interesting is that Christopher Nolan is such a great director. I mean, if you haven't seen Tenet, I mean, it's definitely such a good movie. And then also, I mean, later this summer, I mean, I believe he's doing Oppenheimer. So, I mean,
Mm,
that's going to be a great film as well. And a lot of people said with The Dark Knight Rises, the ending scene where Alfred is in Italy and he looks across the, cafe and he sees Bruce, sitting there with, Catgirl or whatever, Catwoman. Um, People are speculating like whether that's actually like real life and Bruce and her escaped to Italy, or if that's just a part of Alfred's imagination and that's what he wishes, um you know that's what he wishes that Bruce could have had, like he wishes that was the life that Bruce could have had, which is actually interesting because I never thought of that. I mean,
yeah, I never thought of that either.
I just assumed that he sacrificed himself and then he just like moved out of Gotham and he went to Italy with her. But I never actually thought of it that way. I never thought of it as maybe he's just picturing that and he just wishes that was the happy ending that he could have gotten. I kind of like that ending better to the trilogy versus him just like sacrificing himself and then escaping. I think it
Yeah,
would be cool if he actually did sacrifice himself and he died. And then, that was Alfred's way of imagining him still there and what he wishes his life could have been like. So that's definitely a good way to look at it. But, that ends our, about half of the list. So with our time running out now, we are going to end this second part and we're going to be back for our third and final part going right into the top four.